I always believed that love was built on trust and quiet sacrifice. For 3 years, I loved a woman who made me feel like I was building something real. For 3 years, I silently carried her burden, paid her debts, and asked for nothing in return. I never expected my sacrifice to become entertainment for strangers on the internet. And when I finally saw that video, everything I thought we had crumbled in less than 3 minutes. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from today. If you believe in respecting the people who sacrifice for you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stay with me to see what happens when a man decides to stop giving everything to someone who gave nothing back. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. My father passed away when I was 12 years old. Heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call from the hospital and a world that would never be the same again. What my father left behind was not money or property. He left behind medical bills that seemed to multiply every month. My mother, Linda, became a different person after that. Not broken, but harder. She worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Waitress during the day, cleaning offices at night. I watched her count every single penny clip coupons from newspapers and cook meals from whatever was cheapest at the grocery store. One evening when I was about 14, she sat me down at the kitchen table. She had a notebook in front of her filled with numbers and calculations. She said to me, "Son, money cannot buy happiness, but debt can destroy everything." That night she taught me how to budget, how to track every dollar, how to plan for emergencies. Those lessons shaped who I became. I worked part-time jobs through high school. I earned scholarships and worked my way through college. I never asked anyone for help because I learned early that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. By the time I was 32, I had built a stable life. I worked as a software engineer at a tech company in Columbus. My salary was $85,000 a year. Not rich, but comfortable. I lived below my means on purpose. A 1-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. A 2017 Toyota Camry that ran perfectly fine. I cooked most of my meals at home. I had an emergency fund that could cover 6 months of expenses. I was investing for retirement. I was proud of what I had built from nothing. Then I met Kristen. It was a Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop near my office. She was sitting at the table next to mine, struggling with her laptop. Something about the Wi-Fi connection. I offered to help, and when she smiled at me, I forgot what book I had been reading. Kristen was 29 years old, worked as a manager at a clothing store in the mall downtown. She was beautiful in a way that made you want to look twice. Bright eyes, easy laugh, the kind of energy that filled up a room. We exchanged numbers that day, and within a week, we were officially dating. Those first few months felt like a dream. Kristen seemed to admire everything about me. She said she loved that I had a plan for the future. She talked about how refreshing it was to meet a man who was responsible with money. We discussed buying a house together someday. Marriage, kids, a whole life stretched out in front of us like a road waiting to be traveled. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I chose to ignore. Kristen loved shopping. She owned more designer handbags than I could count. Her closet was filled with shoes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Whenever I noticed these things, I told myself it was just her hobby. Who was I to judge how someone else spent their money? 1 year into our relationship, everything changed. We were sitting on my couch after dinner when Kristen started crying. Not gentle tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from deep inside. When I asked her what was wrong, she could barely get the words out. She owed $20,000 on her credit cards. The interest rate was 24%. She had been paying only the minimum each month, which barely covered the interest. The debt was not shrinking. It was growing. She told me it happened because she had to help her family through some hard times, and she had made some bad financial decisions when she was younger. I did not get angry. I did not lecture her. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Compassion. I thought about my mother drowning in debt after my father died. I thought about how hopeless that must have felt. I did not want the woman I loved to feel that same despair. So I made her an offer. I would pay off her debt, $1,200 a month until it was gone. She would not have to pay me back. All I asked was that she stop creating new debt and let me help her learn to manage her finances. Kristen cried even harder, but this time from what I thought was gratitude. She promised she would change. She said she would learn from me. She told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her. I set up automatic payments from my savings account to her credit card. I did not tell anyone about this arrangement. I did not want Kristen to feel embarrassed. This was between us, a sacrifice made in love. That was the beginning of the end, though I did not know it yet. After I started paying off her debt, I expected Kristen to become more careful with money. Instead, the opposite happened. She started spending more than ever before. 3 months into our arrangement, she came home with news. She had bought a new car, a BMW. Brand new with monthly payments that made my stomach turn. When I asked her about it, she got defensive immediately. She said she needed a nice car to look professional at work. She said I would not understand because I did not care about appearances. I wanted to argue, but I held my tongue. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being too judgmental. I convinced myself that the car was a one-time thing. But it was not a one-time thing. Kristen signed up for a premium gym membership, $75 a month. She started getting regular spa treatments. She subscribed to multiple beauty boxes that arrived at our door every week. She bought clothes, constantly always justifying it as needing to look good for her job. Whenever I tried to talk to her about spending, she shut me down. She told me I was not her father. She said I was too cheap, that I needed to learn how to live in the moment instead of always planning for some distant future. She accused me of trying to control her. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Every conversation about money turned into a fight. Every suggestion I made was seen as criticism. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was too strict. Maybe I was the problem. Around this time, Kristen discovered TikTok. She created an account and started posting videos about her lifestyle. Fashion hauls, makeup tutorials, day-in-my-life content that showed her shopping, eating at restaurants, living what looked like a glamorous existence. Her follower count grew steadily. She became obsessed with the app, always filming, always checking her notifications. I did not use TikTok. I had no interest in social media beyond occasionally checking LinkedIn for work, so I had no idea what Kristen was posting. She never showed me, and I never thought to ask. The distance between us grew wider every week. When I suggested a camping trip for our anniversary, she laughed at me. She said she did not want to live like a poor person. When I mentioned saving for a house down payment, she changed the subject. She started comparing me unfavorably to her friends' boyfriends, men who took their girlfriends on expensive vacations, men who bought jewelry without checking price tags. Nothing I did was ever good enough. Kristen started going out with her friends more frequently. She would come home late sometimes, past midnight, smelling like alcohol and cigarettes. When I asked where she had been, she accused me of being controlling. When I noticed she was hiding her phone screen from me, she said I was paranoid. Through all of this, I kept making those payments. $1,200 every month transferred automatically from my savings to her credit card. I had paid off $14,000 over 14 months. Only $6,000 left to go. I told myself that once the debt was cleared, things would get better. We could start fresh. I was wrong. The call came on a Saturday night. My best friend Marcus, a guy I had known since freshman year of college, was on the other end. His voice sounded strange, hesitant. He said, "Man, I need you to see something, but you should probably sit down first." He texted me a link to a TikTok video. The view count showed over 500,000. When I pressed play, my whole world collapsed. The video showed Kristen sitting on a couch with 3 other people. I recognized one of them, a guy named Derek, who she had mentioned as a friend from work. They were all laughing, drinks in their hands. The title of the video read, "Dating a Man Who Budgets the Struggle is Real." Kristen was doing an impression of me. She made her voice deep and serious. She said, "Babe, we have a grocery budget of $300 this month." Everyone burst out laughing like it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Then she continued. She told them how I used coupons, how I insisted on cooking at home instead of eating out, how I had a spreadsheet for everything. She said even our date nights have a budget and rolled her eyes dramatically. Derek leaned in and said, "Girl, you deserve a man who treats you like a queen, not an accountant." Kristen laughed and replied, "I know, right, but at least he is stable, I guess." The comments section was filled with people mocking me. A stranger I had never met wrote, "Dump him and find a real provider." And Kristen had responded to that comment. She wrote, "Still thinking about it," followed by the letters LOL. I noticed something that made my chest physically ache. In the video, Kristen was wearing the dress I had bought her for her birthday, the one I had saved up for because I knew she wanted it. And the handbag next to her on the couch was one she had purchased recently paid for with money she had available because I was covering her debt. I watched that video 3 times. I kept hoping I had misunderstood something, that there was context I was missing. But there was nothing to misunderstand. The woman I loved had turned me into a joke for strangers on the internet. I sat alone in my apartment for 15 minutes after the video ended. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just felt numb, completely and totally numb. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the darkness of my living room thinking about the past 3 years. Every sacrifice I had made played through my mind like a movie I could not pause. I remembered the vacation I had wanted to take to visit my mom in Ohio. I canceled it because money was tight after I started paying Kristen's debt. I remembered the job promotion I was offered 2 years ago. It required relocating to Seattle, better pay, better opportunities. I turned it down because Kristen said she did not want to leave Columbus. I remembered all the time she criticized my lifestyle, and I just absorbed it, convinced that I was the one who needed to change. I pulled up my banking app and looked at the transaction history. 14 months of payments, $1,200 each time, $14,000 total. Money I had earned through years of discipline and sacrifice handed over to someone who saw my values as a punchline. At 2:17 in the morning, I made a decision. I logged into the automatic payment system and canceled the transfer to Kristen's credit card. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. This was not revenge. This was simply me choosing to stop sacrificing for someone who did not deserve it. Kristen came home the next evening like nothing had happened. She walked through the door chattering about some party she had been to with her friends. She talked about the music and the drinks and how much fun everyone had. She did not even look at me properly until she noticed I was just sitting there staring at her. "What is wrong with you? Why are you looking at me like that?" I picked up my phone, opened the TikTok video, and handed it to her without saying a word. The color drained from her face as she watched. When it ended, she immediately went on the defensive. She said, "It is just a joke. Everyone makes videos like that. It does not mean anything." I kept my voice calm. I asked her a joke. "You humiliated me in front of 500,000 people. You mocked everything about who I am." She tried another approach. She said, "Nobody knows it is you. I never used your name. You are overreacting." I stood up from the couch. I said, "You know what is funny? Kristen, while you were making content making fun of my budget, that same budget was paying off your $20,000 credit card debt." She froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I continued. 14 months, $14,000, from my savings account, the same savings you laughed about in that video. The tears started then. She said, "I did not know you would see it. I am so sorry. I will delete it right now. I will never do anything like that again." I shook my head. I told her I canceled the automatic payment last night. "You still owe $6,000. That is your responsibility now." Her tears turned to panic. She grabbed my arm and said, "You cannot do that. I cannot afford that. My credit score will be destroyed. How am I supposed to pay my car note and that debt At the same time, I looked at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. I said, "You should have thought about that before you made me a punchline for clout." I told her she had 1 week to move her things out of my apartment. She begged. She cried. She said she loved me and that she had been stupid, and please could I give her another chance. I told her the truth. I said you loved what I provided. You never loved who I am. There is a difference. Then I walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I could hear her crying in the living room for another hour before she finally left. The week that followed was strange. Kristen texted me constantly. She called multiple times a day. She left voicemails swinging between apologies and anger. I did not respond to any of it. She moved her belongings out piece by piece, always hoping I would be there so she could try to talk to me. I made sure I was at work or out with Marcus whenever she came by. She deleted the TikTok video, but it was too late. People had already screen recorded it. Someone had reposted it to Twitter with the caption, "When your boyfriend finds out about your debt." The irony of strangers mocking her now was not lost on me, but I found no satisfaction in it. 10 days after our final conversation, I got a phone call from Mrs. Patterson. She was an elderly woman who lived in the same apartment complex as Kristen's friend where she had been staying. Mrs. Patterson knew me because I had helped her with her computer a few times when I was visiting Kristen there. She told me what she had seen that morning. A tow truck from a finance company had arrived at the complex. They were there to repossess a BMW. The car belonged to Kristen. She had missed 2 months of payments and the finance company had run out of patience. Mrs. Patterson said Kristen had come running outside in her pajamas, crying and begging them to stop. But there was nothing anyone could do. The car was gone in less than 10 minutes. When I hung up the phone, I felt something I did not expect. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just a hollow kind of sadness. This was not the future I had imagined for us. But this was the natural consequence of choices she had made. Not my choices. Hers. I did not reach out to offer comfort. I did not call to say I told you so. I simply continued with my own life and let her figure out her own path. The first few weeks after everything ended were harder than I expected. I could not sleep properly. I would lie awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had been too harsh, questioning whether I should have handled things differently. The apartment felt too quiet. Everywhere I looked there were memories. The spot on the couch where she used to sit, the mug she always drank coffee from in the morning, the empty space in the closet where her clothes had been. I allowed myself to grieve. I did not pretend to be strong. I did not try to convince myself I was fine when I was not. I talked to Marcus almost every day. He listened without judgment and reminded me that I had done nothing wrong. He told me once, "You did not lose her man. You freed yourself from someone who was using you. That is not the same thing." I knew he was right, but knowing something and feeling it are two different things. After about a month, I decided to visit my mother in Ohio. I had not seen her in almost a year because I had been so focused on Kristen and our life together. The moment I walked through her front door, she knew something was wrong. Mothers always know. We sat at the same kitchen table where she had taught me about budgeting all those years ago. I told her everything. The debt I had been paying. The video. The breakup. All of it. My mother listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. She said, "Son, your generous heart is not a weakness. It is one of the best things about you. But you need to learn how to give without losing yourself. The right person will match your effort. They will never make you feel small for being responsible." She made me dinner that night, my favorite meal from childhood. We did not talk about Kristen again. We talked about my father, about her garden, about the neighbors and their new dog. It was exactly what I needed. When I returned to Columbus, something had shifted inside me. I started making changes, small ones at first. I began running every morning, 5 miles before work. It was something I had always wanted to do, but Kristen had called it boring and pointless. Now, I discovered I loved it. The rhythm of my feet on the pavement, the quiet of the early morning streets, the feeling of accomplishment before the day even started. I signed up for guitar lessons at a music store downtown. I'd wanted to learn since I was a teenager, but there was never time or money. Now I had both. Tuesday evenings became my favorite part of the week. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my relationship, college buddies I had lost touch with, coworkers I never made time for. I discovered that my world had become very small when I was with Kristen. Now it was expanding again. I started volunteering at a community center on weekends teaching financial literacy to young adults, showing them how to budget, how to save, how to avoid the traps that catch so many people. It felt meaningful in a way my regular job never did. 3 months after the breakup, my manager called me into her office. She told me the position in Seattle was open again, the one I had turned down 2 years ago for Kristen. Same role, but with an even better salary. She asked if I was interested. I said yes without hesitation. The move to Seattle felt like shedding an old skin. New city, new apartment with a view of the mountains, new people who knew nothing about my past. I could be whoever I wanted to be. 6 months later, I barely recognized my own life. I had a job I was excited about, friends who valued my company, hobbies that brought me joy. I still lived on a budget. I still tracked my expenses. I still believed in planning for the future. But now I did these things with pride instead of apology. I thought about Kristen sometimes, not with anger anymore. The rage had faded into something quieter, a kind of distant sadness for what could have been if she had been different, if we had been different together. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved back in with her parents. Her credit was wrecked. The TikTok account was deleted. I hoped she had learned something from all of it. I hoped she would make better choices in the future. But her journey was no longer my concern. What I learned from those 3 years was this: there is a difference between loving someone and losing yourself in someone. There is a difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. I had confused those things for too long. The right kind of love does not require you to shrink. It does not ask you to be embarrassed about your values. It does not turn your generosity into content for strangers to mock. The right kind of love builds you up. It matches your effort. It sees your quirks and your spreadsheets and your coupon clipping and says, "This is part of who you are and I love all of it." I am still waiting to find that kind of love. But for the first time in years, I am not in a hurry. I am happy with who I am. I am proud of the life I have built. And I know that when the right person comes along, I will recognize her, because she will never make me feel small for being exactly who I am. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop loving someone who never learned to love you back. And sometimes the budget that someone mocks is the same budget that was saving them all along. They just could not see it until it was gone. If you have ever sacrificed for someone who did not appreciate it, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and share what you learned from that experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories about real life, real consequences, and real growth. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you always know your worth, and I hope you never settle for anyone who makes you question it.